The pen hovered over the contract. My own brother couldn't look at me as he prepared to sign away my life to settle his debt. The loan shark, Victor, leered, already reaching to claim his property. But then his head enforcer, a silent giant checking the merchandise, froze. His fingers brushed the hidden mark on my neck. His head snapped up, eyes blazing with a shock that turned to fury. "Boss," he growled, the sound vibrating in the cramped office. "She carries the king's mark. The girl was just a debt payment, a piece of property in a ledger. The mark was a legend, a birthright claimed only by the most feared man in the city's underworld. And Victor had just tried to buy her." In that frozen second, everyone in the room knew the same terrifying truth. A king does not share his crown, and he does not forgive those who touch what is his. Her name was Elara, and until that week, her world was defined by quiet desperation and a simple, crushing routine. By day, she worked the early shift at a 24-hour diner off the interstate, serving coffee to truckers and scraping together tips. By night, she returned to the cramped, mildew-scented apartment she shared with her older brother, Leo, and tried to ignore the pile of final notices on the kitchen table. Their parents were gone, lost to a highway accident years prior, and Leo had stepped in as guardian. But Leo had a sickness, a need for the flash of high-stakes poker that he could never afford. His latest attempt to dig himself out had backfired catastrophically. He owed a man named Viktor Krasnov $87,000, and Viktor was not a forgiving lender. Viktor operated from a refurbished meatpacking warehouse in the city's industrial quarter. To the city council, he was a legitimate import-export businessman. To those in his world, he was a financier of last resort, with interest rates that climbed like ivy and collection methods that were legendarily final. He preferred assets to cash, and his contracts often included unconventional clauses for repayment. Leo, panicked and out of options, had begged for one final extension. Victor had granted it, but the terms were not written in any legal ledger. The payment was not monetary. The payment was Elara. Leo came home that Tuesday night, his face gray. He couldn't meet her eyes. "There's a meeting, El, Friday night, at Victor's office. You have to come. It's about settling things." Elara felt a cold trickle of dread. She knew of Victor by reputation only, whispered warnings from other waitresses who had seen too much. "What did you do, Leo?" He just shook his head, a sob caught in his throat. "I fixed it. I fixed it all. Just please, be there. Wear the black dress." The request felt like a sentence. The warehouse office was not what she expected. It was sleek, cold, all polished concrete and glass, overlooking the shadowy cavern of the empty packing floor below. Victor sat behind a massive desk of dark walnut. He was in his 50s, with silver-flecked hair and eyes the color of a frozen lake. He assessed Elara not as a person, but as a piece of inventory, his gaze lingering on her face, her posture. Leo stood trembling beside her, a sheaf of papers in his hand. This voids the debt? All of it?" Leo stammered. Victor gave a slow, reptilian smile. "All of it. Sign there, and here. The girl consents to transfer of guardianship and employment. A simple domestic service contract." 5 years. Elara's blood ran cold. Domestic service. It was a transparent euphemism. She was being sold into debt bondage, a practice everyone knew existed, but no one acknowledged. This was the price for Leo's failures. As Leo's pen hovered over the signature line, Victor gestured to the massive man who stood silently by the door. "Marek, standard inspection. Ensure our new asset is in good health." Marek was Victor's shadow, a head taller than anyone else, built like a fortified wall, with a silence that was more threatening than any shout. He moved with unsettling grace for a man his size. Elara flinched as he approached. He didn't speak. His instructions were a series of short gestures. "Turn, lift your chin, show your hands." It was dehumanizing, clinical. He checked her teeth, the calluses on her hands, the scars on her wrists from hot kitchen trays. As his rough fingers brushed the hair away from the nape of her neck, Elara stiffened. There, hidden beneath her hairline, was a birthmark she'd had since childhood, a distinct wine-dark pattern that resembled a crescent moon intersecting a stylized wolf's head. Her mother had called it a lucky charm. Marek's fingers stilled, then they pressed gently against the mark. A jolt, like static electricity, arced through them both. Marek's breath hitched. His head snapped up, not to look at Victor, but to stare at Elara with an expression of utter, world-shattering shock. The placid emptiness in his eyes evaporated, replaced by a blazing, golden intensity that didn't seem human. The air in the room grew heavy, thick with a pressure that made Leo whimper. Victor's smile faded. "Marek? What is it?" Marek didn't answer his boss. He slowly turned his head, his golden gaze locking onto Victor. The growl that rumbled from his chest was low, primal, and shook the glass in the desk's surface. "Boss," he said, the word vibrating with lethal fury. "She bears the king's mark." The silence that followed Marek's declaration wasn't empty. It was a vacuum, sucking all the air, all the pretense out of the room. Viktor Krasnov stared at his most trusted enforcer, the man who had never questioned an order, whose loyalty had been bought with blood and money. The frozen lake in Viktor's eyes began to crack with confusion, then a dawning icy fear. The what? What nonsense is this, Marek? Step away from her. Marek didn't move. His massive body remained positioned between Ilara and Viktor's desk, a living barricade. The golden fire in his gaze hadn't dimmed, it had intensified, fixed on his employer with a look of pure, undiluted warning. "The king's mark," Marek repeated, each word precise and heavy. "The crescent and wolf. It is not a legend, it is a claim, and you just tried to purchase what is already owned." Leo, utterly lost, looked from Viktor to his sister. "What's happening? What mark? Ilara, what is he talking about?" Ilara could only shake her head, her hand flying to the back of her neck. The skin there, where Marek's fingers had pressed, was warm, almost humming. A feeling she'd never known, a connection, a terrifying anchor had snapped into place in her chest at his touch. It felt ancient and undeniable. Viktor stood up slowly, trying to reclaim the room with his authority. "Marek, you work for me. Whatever you think you see, we have a contract. The debt is settled upon signature." He gestured to Leo, who still clutched the pen. "Sign it." Before Leo could move, Marek took a single step forward. The floor seemed to vibrate. "If you touch that pen," Marek said, his voice dropping to a gravelly whisper that was somehow more frightening than a shout, "you are signing your own death warrant. And yours, Krasnov. You are not dealing with a simple girl. You are touching the property of Kalin." The name landed in the room like a physical blow. Viktor paled. Even Leo, in his cocoon of debt and desperation, seemed to recognize it. "Kalin. It wasn't a name you said aloud, it was a force you avoided." He didn't control a district or a business, he was the unseen current beneath the entire city's underworld. He didn't make loans, he owned the banks. He didn't employ enforcers, he commanded legions. Rumors said he was more than a man, that his wealth and power came from something old, something primal. And his mark was said to be on the things he cherished most, his territory, his inner circle, his queen. Viktor's mind was racing, calculating. This changed everything. This wasn't about $87,000 anymore. This was about survival. If this girl truly bore that mark, he had just offered to buy Kalin's fated mate. The absurdity of it was eclipsed only by the sheer, catastrophic danger. "There must be a mistake," Viktor insisted, but his voice lacked its usual steel. "A coincidence, a birthmark." "There is no mistake," Marek said, finally tearing his gaze from Viktor to look at Ilara. The intensity in his eyes softened, just a fraction, into something like awe and absolute duty. "The bond sparked the moment I touched it. I am bound to serve the king, and through him, his marked mate. My loyalty is no longer yours, Krasnov. It is hers." The shift in power was absolute and instantaneous. Marek, Viktor's most formidable weapon, had just switched sides. Ilara, who minutes ago was chattel, was now protected by the very force meant to imprison her. Viktor sank back into his chair, a sheen of sweat on his brow. "What? What do you require?" Marek didn't answer him. He spoke to Ilara, his tone formal, reverent. "My lady, you are in danger here. Will you permit me to remove you from this place and take you to safety?" To him? Ilara's mind was reeling. The word him vibrated in her soul. This Kalin, this king, the true owner of the mark on her skin. A stranger of unimaginable power. Yet, the alternative was Viktor, the contract, a life of servitude. The strange warmth in her chest pulled her toward the idea of him with a magnetic certainty she couldn't deny. She found her voice, small but clear. "Yes, get me out of here." Marek gave a sharp nod. He then looked at Leo, who was trembling violently. "The debt," Marek stated, "is nullified. The contract is void. If you speak of this meeting, of the mark, of her, you will not live to see another sunrise. Do you understand?" Leo could only nod, tears of relief and terror streaming down his face. Viktor found a last reservoir of defiance. "This is my office, Marek. You can't just walk out of here. I have men downstairs." Marek actually smiled, a cold, grim thing. "Call them. Let them try to stop me from taking what belongs to the king. It will save Kalin the trouble of cleaning house later." The threat was unmistakable. Viktor's empire was now a house of cards, and Marek had just pointed to the foundation. Without another word, Marek gently took Ilara's arm. His touch was careful, respectful, but firm. He guided her past the desk, past her shell-shocked brother, and toward the door. Victor did nothing. He just watched, the reality of his fatal miscalculation settling in. The drive away from the warehouse was made in a sleek, black SUV that seemed to absorb the light from the street lamps. Merrick was behind the wheel, his focus absolute. Ilara sat in the back, her mind a whirlwind. "Where are we going?" she finally asked. "To Obsidian Point," Merrick replied. "The king's residence. It is the only place secure enough." "Who is he?" Ilara whispered, the question that had been burning inside her. "What am I to him?" Merrick glanced at her in the rearview mirror, his golden eyes reflecting the dash lights. "He is Kalen, the last true alpha of our kind. And you are his fated mate. The mark on your neck is proof. It appears on the one whose soul is destined to balance his, to rule beside him. He has been waiting for you for a very long time. Our kind. Alpha." The words should have sounded insane. But after the energy in that room, after the way Merrick had moved and spoken, they felt like a key turning in a lock, opening a door to a world she'd always felt lurking at the edges of her own. A world of wolves, of kings, of bonds written in the stars and sealed on skin. They arrived at Obsidian Point just before dawn. It wasn't a house, it was a fortress of modern glass and dark steel, built into a cliffside overlooking the churning black waters of the bay. The security was invisible but palpable. A pressure in the air, the sense of being watched by unseen, lethal eyes. Marek escorted her through a grand, minimalist entrance hall, and into a vast living area with a wall of glass facing the sea. "Wait here," he instructed. "He is coming." Ilara stood alone, shivering in her cheap black dress, feeling like a ghost in this palace of power. The tension from the warehouse had evolved into a different, more profound anxiety. She was about to meet the man whose mark she wore. The man who, by some ancient law, owned her soul. Then she felt it. A shift in the atmosphere, deeper and more potent than what Marek had projected. The air grew charged, thick with the scent of ozone, pine, and something wild, a forest under a winter moon. The double doors at the far end of the room opened. Kalen stepped inside. He was taller than Marek, his presence not just physical but existential, filling the space and demanding submission. He wore dark, simple clothes that did nothing to hide his predatory grace. His hair was the color of raven feathers, his face all sharp angles and fierce beauty. But it was his eyes that held her captive, a luminous, burning amber, currently fixed on her with an intensity that stole her breath. He crossed the room in silence, his gaze never leaving hers. Ilara couldn't move. As he stopped before her, the warmth in her chest exploded into a blazing heat, a silent roar of recognition. This was the other end of the tether she'd felt snap into place. This was him. Kalen reached out, his fingers hovering near her jaw. He was trembling, just slightly. The feared king was trembling. He leaned in, inhaling deeply at the juncture of her neck and shoulder. A low, possessive growl reverberated in his chest. When he pulled back, his amber eyes were swirling with brilliant gold. "Mine," he breathed, the word a vow and a verdict. Then his expression darkened, the gold eyes flashing with a sudden, murderous rage. He had smelled it on her, the fear, the desperation, the sour tang of the transaction she had just endured. He turned his head sharply toward Marek, who stood at attention by the door. "Who?" Kalen's voice was deadly quiet. "Who dared to try and take what is mine?" Marek didn't hesitate. "Viktor Krasnov. He held a contract for her brother's debt. The payment was her." Kalen's amber eyes blazed, the gold within them swirling like molten metal. The air in the room grew so thick with his rage that the glass walls seemed to bow inward. "Viktor," Kalen repeated, the name a curse. "The moneylender. He thought to put my mate in his ledger." He turned back to Ilara, the rage softening into a concern that was somehow more terrifying in its intensity. "Did he touch you?" Ilara shook her head, still overwhelmed. "No. But he looked. He priced me." A low, continuous growl emanated from Kalen's chest. "Marek, gather the inner guard. We leave for the warehouse in 10 minutes. Viktor Krasnov's operation ends tonight. Permanently." "No." The word was out of Ilara's mouth before she could think. Both men stared at her. Kalen's anger flickered with surprise. "No," she repeated, stronger now. "You can't just storm in there. There were other people. My brother is still there. And if you start a war in the middle of the city, won't that expose everything?" She gestured vaguely, encompassing the unseen world of alphas and marks. Kalen studied her, his head tilted. "You would show mercy to the man who sold you?" "I'm showing sense," Ilara said, the practical waitress who balanced ledgers in her head rising to the surface. Killing him solves one problem and creates 10 more. The police, the media, the other businessmen who will see it as weakness or an opening. She took a shaky breath. You said I was meant to rule beside you. So let me rule. Don't start my new life with a bloodbath over a man who isn't worth the stain on your floor. A slow, profound smile spread across Kaelin's face, the gold in his eyes receding to a warm, proud amber. He looked at Marek. You see, a queen thinks 3 moves ahead. He returned his gaze to Elara. Your wisdom is noted, and it is valuable. But my mate, you must understand, in our world, a challenge cannot go unanswered. The insult must be cleansed, or others will think you, and by extension, I can be touched. Then answer it smartly, Elara insisted. Bankrupt him. Take what he values. His money, his reputation. Leave him with nothing but the breath in his lungs to remind him of his mistake. Kaelin was silent for a long moment, then gave a single, sharp nod. As my queen commands. Marek, call Silas. We do this through channels. Freeze every asset, call in every marker, and blacklist him with the council. I want him financially hollow by sunrise. But Kaelin's world, for all its primal power, was still connected to the human one. And Viktor Krasnov, though shaken, was not a man who accepted defeat. As Kaelin's financial operatives began their silent, digital assault, Viktor was already making his own desperate move. He couldn't fight Kaelin's enforcers. But he could fight him in a human courtroom. The next afternoon, as Elara was tentatively exploring the gardens of Obsidian Point with a new, silent guard named Jackson, Kaelin's head of security, a severe woman named Lynn, found them. Her expression was grim. Alpha. Luna, we have a problem from the city. In Kaelin's office, Lynn placed a thick legal document on the desk. Viktor Krasnov has filed an emergency injunction in Superior Court. He is alleging grand larceny and kidnapping. Elara's heart dropped. What? Lynn tapped the paper. He claims that last night, a rival criminal enterprise, that's us, forcibly abducted a woman, Elara, who was under his legal guardianship via a valid debt settlement contract. He claims we also stole sensitive financial documents during the incident. He's asking for her immediate return and for a freeze on all of your, Luna, personal assets pending investigation. He's hired Sterling and Cross. They're human, but they're pit bulls. Kaelin's calm shattered. The windows rattled. He is using their laws to steal you back. He is claiming I stole my own mate. It's a frame, Elara said, her mind racing. He's creating a paper trail to make it look legal. If human authorities get involved, if they start digging into you, into this place, it exposes us all. Kaelin finished, his voice cold. He cannot win, but he can create enough noise to be dangerous. He wants to force us to give you up to avoid scrutiny. We won't, Elara said, the certainty surprising her. No, Kaelin agreed. We will not. But we must answer this in their arena. Lynn, contact our human counsel. We will meet him in court. There is more, Lynn said, her jaw tight. The injunction includes a scheduled emergency arbitration hearing, tomorrow morning, at the Sterling and Cross building. If we don't appear, he gets a default judgment and goes to the media. Kaelin stood, a predator ready to pounce. Then we will appear, and we will end him. The hearing room was a temple of cold human authority. Floor-to-ceiling windows showed a gloomy Seattle sky. Viktor sat at one end of a long slate table, flanked by 2 expensively suited lawyers. He looked tired but smug, a man playing his last best card. Leo was not present. When Kaelin, Elara, and Lynn entered, the dynamic shifted entirely. Kaelin wore a suit that cost more than the room, and he carried an aura of raw power that made the human lawyers adjust their ties nervously. Elara, in a simple but elegant dress, held her head high. The arbiter, a retired judge, began. We are here to discuss the allegations of kidnapping and theft. Mr. Krasnov, you may proceed. Viktor's lawyer laid out the fabricated case, the signed contract, the witnessed agreement, the sudden violent removal of Elara by armed men, the missing documents. It was a clean, cynical narrative. The digital footprint of the signed agreement is time-stamped and verifiable, the lawyer concluded. We seek the immediate return of Miss Elara to her lawful guardian and the freezing of any assets she may have improperly accessed. Viktor leaned forward, his eyes on Elara. Just come back, dear. We can forget all this. You belong with me. Kaelin didn't move a muscle, but the temperature in the room seemed to drop. The arbiter looked to their side. Your response? Elara stood up. Kaelin gave a slight, approving nod. May I approach the screen, Your Honor? Her voice was calm, clear. The waitress was gone. The Luna was present. With permission, Ilara took a tablet. She plugged it in and the large screen behind Victor lit up. Mr. Krasnov claims I was under a legal guardianship contract, she began. He is correct that a contract was signed. However, he fails to note that the signatory, my brother, was under direct witnessed duress, fearing for his life. That voids the contract. I have here sworn affidavits from two of Mr. Krasnov's own former employees, currently in witness protection, ready to attest to his methods of coercion. Victor's smirk faded. His lawyers exchanged a glance. Furthermore, Ilara continued, tapping the screen. He claims financial documents were stolen. What was actually removed was evidence of his own crimes. A cascade of bank statements, shell company registrations, and wire transfers filled the screen. While preparing to defend against these false allegations, a forensic audit was run on Mr. Krasnov's holdings. It appears the $87,000 debt he cited was itself fabricated. The money was drawn from a charitable foundation he controls, a foundation currently under federal investigation for fraud. He wasn't collecting a debt. He was laundering money and using me to cover the shortfall. Chaos erupted. Victor's lead lawyer stood up. This is irrelevant character assassination. This data is fraudulent. The data is from the Federal Reserve's own secure server, a new voice said. Lin had stepped forward, holding a federal agent's badge. I am Agent Lin Shao, Financial Crimes Task Force. We've been building a case against Mr. Krasnov for 18 months. His filing today provided the final piece of evidence we needed. She looked at the stunned arbiter. The United States government will be taking over this proceeding. The allegations against Miss Ilara and Mr. Kalin are dismissed. Viktor Krasnov, you are under arrest for wire fraud, money laundering and attempted trafficking. It was a perfect, devastating checkmate. Victor had walked into a trap he didn't know was set. As two plainclothes federal agents moved to handcuff him, his smugness vaporized into sheer panic. He stared at Ilara, then at Kalin, who hadn't moved from his chair, a faint cold smile on his lips. But Victor, in his death throes, had one last move. As the agents pulled him up, his fear twisted into spite. He looked right at Ilara and shouted, his voice echoing in the quiet room. You think you've won? You are just a fancy pet for a monster. He's not a man, he's a beast. They're all beasts, you'll see. The room froze. The human lawyers looked confused. The arbiter frowned. The federal agents paused. It was the exposure Kalin had feared, a public, screaming allegation of the truth, meant to sow doubt and attract the worst kind of attention. Kalin slowly rose to his full height. The air pressure changed. He didn't speak to Victor. He spoke to the room, his voice calm, absolute, and carrying an undeniable weight of command that hushed everyone. The defendant is clearly delusional, attempting to concoct a fantastical defense now that his financial crimes have been uncovered. Agent Shao, I suggest you get him the psychological evaluation he clearly needs. The spell was broken. The agents nodded, chalking it up to the ravings of a cornered criminal. They dragged a spluttering Victor away. But as they left, he locked eyes with Kalin one last time, and his mouth formed a silent, venomous promise. Outside, in the sleek back seat of the armored car, Ilara let out a breath she didn't know she was holding. It's over. Kalin took her hand, but his expression was grave. No, my queen, it is not. He shouted our secret in a room of humans. He is in custody, and he has nothing left to lose. A desperate, hateful man with knowledge of our world is now in the hands of human authorities. This is not an ending. This is how a much more dangerous war begins. Kalin was right. Viktor Krasnov, sitting in a federal holding cell, had only one currency left: information. He began talking, not about his money laundering, but about the monsters who had taken his property. He whispered to his lawyer about beasts that walked as men, about an alpha king in a glass fortress, about a girl with a mark that commanded wolves. At first it was dismissed as the ramblings of a broken man. But he was consistent and he knew details. The location of Obsidian Point, Marek's unnerving presence, the way the air had changed in his office. Whispers began to circulate, not in the criminal underworld, but in a much older, more secretive one, the North American Shifter Council. 2 weeks after the hearing, the summons arrived. The council, a gathering of the oldest and most powerful alphas from across the continent, would convene at Obsidian Point. Their purpose, to determine if Kalin's actions had brought dangerous human scrutiny upon their hidden kind. The grand hall of the compound was filled with formidable presences, each alpha a ruler of their own territory. Kalin sat at the head of the ancient redwood table, Ilara beside him, a crown of woven silver and onyx resting in her hair. She was no longer a scared girl in a diner uniform. She was the Luna of the Northern Territory, and her calm demeanor silenced the initial murmurs. An elder from the Eastern Pact spoke first, his voice gravelly with disapproval. "Kaelin, your mate was nearly sold to a human. That human is now in federal custody, babbling about our world. The exposure risk is unacceptable. This is a failure of protection." Kaelin's jaw tightened, but before he could speak, Elara did. "The failure was not Kaelin's," she said, her voice clear and carrying. "It was mine. I lived ignorant of my own nature, in a world that preyed on the weak. The failure was a system that allows our kind to live in shadows so deep that a young wolf can be trafficked by humans without any of us knowing." Her words hung in the air, a sharp rebuke to their centuries of secrecy. Another alpha, a fierce woman from the southwest, leaned forward. "And what do you propose, Luna?" "The human knows. He speaks. Then we ensure no one listens," Elara replied. She nodded to Lynn, who activated a screen. It showed a series of medical reports and psychiatric evaluations. "Through our contacts, Viktor Krasnov has been diagnosed with severe paranoid schizophrenia, brought on by the stress of his financial collapse and arrest. His tales of werewolves are now part of his official medical record, cited as vivid psychotic delusions. Every outlet he speaks to will be given this report. He will be a laughingstock, not a whistleblower." A ripple of impressed murmurs went around the table. It was a clean, ruthless human solution. The elder frowned. "And the brother? The one who made the deal? He knows as well." Elara's expression softened, but only slightly. "Leo knows only that I am protected by powerful people. He believes the mark is a powerful gang tattoo. He is being relocated to a new city with a new identity and a job, courtesy of Kaelin Global's legitimate HR department. He will be comfortable, watched, and silent. He owes his life and his freedom to my mate's mercy. He will not talk." The council was silent, weighing her words. The fierce female alpha spoke again. "And the Krasnov Empire?" Kaelin finally spoke, his tone definitive. "Dissolved. Its legitimate assets absorbed by my corporations, its illicit operations dismantled. His territory is now mine. His former pack members, those who were merely employees, will be offered positions. Those who were complicit in his darker trades have been dealt with." The judgment was complete. Elara had addressed every point of vulnerability with precision and force. The lead elder studied her, then gave a slow, respectful nod. "The Luna strategy is admirably thorough. The council finds no fault. The Crescent Bay territory is formally recognized under Kaelin's rule." With that, the meeting adjourned. The exposure crisis was over, extinguished not by claw and tooth, but by cunning and cold, hard strategy. In the quiet of their private quarters later that night, Elara finally allowed herself to breathe. The constant tension of the past month began to ebb. Kaelin wrapped his arms around her from behind, looking out over the moonlit bay with her. "You were magnificent," he murmured into her hair. "They saw a queen today. I saw the woman I always knew was there." Elara leaned back into him. "What happens now?" "Now," Kaelin said, turning her to face him. "You rule, not from the shadows, but from the light. The charities you wanted to oversee, the reforms for orphaned shifters you proposed, the council will fund them. Because you did not just win a battle today, you established a new kind of power." Months passed. The story of Viktor Krasnov faded from the news, a footnote about a fraudulent businessman who lost his mind. Obsidian Point became not just a fortress, but a home. Elara's natural talent for organization and finance found purpose in managing Kaelin's vast legitimate empire, her touch making it more profitable and more humane. Her bond with Kaelin deepened into an unshakable partnership, the mark on her neck a constant warm hum of connection. One evening, an elder from the council, the same one who had first questioned them, requested a private audience. He arrived with an ancient leather-bound book. "Luna Elara," he said, his demeanor surprisingly humble. "In studying the archives regarding the King's Mark, we found something. The crescent and wolf design is not only for a fated mate." He opened the book to a detailed illustration that matched Elara's birthmark perfectly. "It is also the sigil of the lost royal line of the original Alpha King, from 1,000 years ago. The mark appears only on a true-born heir of that bloodline when their destined mate is near. You are not just a fated mate, my lady. You are returned royalty. Your blood legitimizes Kaelin's rule in a way no challenge can ever undo." The revelation was staggering. Her ordinary painful human life had been a mask. She was born to this. The mark was not just a claim by Kaelin, it was her own birthright announcing itself. Far away, in a sterile federal prison, Viktor Krasnov sat in a common room, mumbling to himself about beasts. Other inmates ignored him. A new prisoner, a quiet man with sharp eyes, sat down beside him. "Heard you know stories," the man said softly. "About the Wolf King." Victor eyed him, paranoid. "You with them?" The man smiled, a faint, cold thing. "Let's just say I'm interested in things that are kept hidden. Tell me everything." But that is a story for another time. Back at Obsidian Point, Elara stood with Kaelin on their balcony, the truth of her lineage settling warmly between them. She was not a pawn sold by her brother. She was not just a saved victim. She was Elara, the lost royal, the fated Luna, and the strategic heart of a kingdom. She had been traded like property, only for the buyer to discover he had purchased a queen. The story of Elara and Kaelin is more than a tale of supernatural fate or criminal justice. It is a stark reminder that the world often mistakes quiet strength for weakness, and that the most powerful forces are not always the loudest. Elara spent a lifetime being overlooked, priced, and discarded by those who believed they held all the power. But beneath the surface of a struggling waitress lived the heart of a queen, and on her skin was written a destiny that no ledger could ever quantify. Viktor Krasnov saw a piece of property, Kaelin saw his other half. In the end, that disconnect between perception and reality was what destroyed an empire and built a kingdom. It asks a compelling question: what hidden potentials, what unseen marks of destiny are walking among us right now, ignored or undervalued, and what happens when the true owner finally arrives to claim what is theirs? Hard karma has a way of finding those who trade in souls. Silas Blackwood learned it in a werewolf ballroom. Viktor Krasnov learned it in a corporate office. The universe has a ledger of its own, and the currency is destiny. If you were captivated by this journey from the depths of betrayal to the heights of royal power, do me a huge favor. Hit that like button, share this with someone who loves a story where the underdog claims their throne, and subscribe to the channel. Ring the notification bell so you never miss our next deep dive into the hidden stories where fate, power, and justice collide. Let me know in the comments what moment of Victor's downfall was the most satisfying for you. Until next time.